Have you ever like stopped and thought about, how much of you, who you are today, actually comes from like way back? I mean, the generations before you.
Yeah. It's almost like an invisible river flowing through your family, carrying all these stories and maybe even some secrets, right?
Totally. And those stories, those secrets, they all kind of come together to make you, you. And today we're diving into Jeffrey Eugenides' Middlesex.
Oh, Middlesex, yeah.
It's fiction, we know that, but it's like this amazing family saga. And it really gets you thinking about like how much our history shapes us, how those big changes in society, they ripple out and touch everyone's
It's
lives.
all connected, yeah, in a way.
Exactly. It's all connected, and that journey of figuring out who you are, well, that's at the heart of this book. So we've been sifting through the layers of this family, the Stephanides family, for you, the learner.
Trying to pull out the really important insights, the gems, the stuff that makes you think.
Right, the stuff that makes you think. And you know what? What I think is so fascinating is how Eugenides, he uses this fictional family to explore like some really universal stuff about being human.
Exactly. And you're right. It's like he takes these big questions about identity, about the past and present, and he makes them real tangible through these characters, through this family's story.
All right, the learner, let's jump in right at the beginning. The narrator, they talk about this desire to track a single gene like through time. Like it's a detective story but with biology, with DNA.
It is, yeah. He calls it a roller coaster ride through time, which I think really captures it. And it immediately sets up this idea of being connected to your ancestors in a really profound way. You're not just an individual, right? You're part of this long line.
Right, right. You're part of something bigger. And Eugenides, he makes it so specific, this connection, because he focuses on a recessive mutation on the fifth chromosome. And get this, it originated near Mount Olympus.
I love that detail. It's like this sweeping family history has this very specific, almost mythical starting point. And for you, the learner, I mean, it makes you think about how even our most personal stories, they have these deep, deep roots.
And this gene, it travels through 9 generations of the Stephanides family. It's hidden, like lurking beneath the surface, until suddenly, boom, it's there. It's like this invisible thread connecting them all.
Absolutely. And I think it highlights this idea that we all carry the histories of our ancestors with us, even the parts we don't know about. And then you have providence and a slaughter, scattering the gene across the ocean to America. It's like fate, right? And these major historical events, they all get woven into this story.
So from ancient Greece, we're jumping ahead in time and across the world, and we get these really vivid descriptions of cultural moment. There's a Greek Easter celebration, red eggs, that cross-shaped sareki bread.
It's so visually rich, the way Eugenides writes those scenes. You can almost smell the bread baking. You see the vibrant colors.
Yeah, you can practically taste it. But then there's this shift. Chapter 11, the narrator's brother, he's feeling a little disconnected. He almost wishes he could believe in the North American God, as he puts it. It's like this clash between the old world and the new world, right?
Right, and that scene really captures the complexities of the immigrant experience, doesn't it? It's not just about moving to a new place. It's about navigating these different cultural realities, these different belief systems. And for chapter 11, he's caught between those two worlds.
It's like he's searching for where he fits in.
Exactly, exactly. And then, we have Desdemona back in Bithynia trying to civilize the young women there, and she's using a lingerie Parisienne catalog. It's quite funny, actually.
It is. It's kind of adorable in a way, like this well-intentioned but maybe slightly misguided attempt at cultural exchange. But it speaks to the power of images, right? Even back then, even something as simple as a catalog could shape people's ideas about what was desirable, what was modern.
Definitely. And it also shows this personal level of trying to bridge cultural divides, even if it's based on a limited view of the world.
And then you contrast that with the way Smyrna is described, right? It's this bustling cosmopolitan city, a mix of languages and customs. Eugenides even mentions like rose petals in the street.
It sounds magical almost.
It does, but then there's the sense of loss, this sadness, because it transforms into modern day Izmit. And it becomes all skyscrapers and factories. It's like this commentary on on progress, on modernization, and how it can sometimes erase these unique cultural identities.
Yeah, and that's a theme that runs through a lot of literature, isn't it? The tension between tradition and modernity, the things we gain and the things we lose as the world changes.
And speaking of change, Lefty and Desdemona, they undergo a massive transformation themselves.
Oh, yeah, their journey to America, that's a huge turning point in their lives.
It really is. It starts as the sipping relationship, and then on the ship they become engaged and then married. I mean, talk about a life-altering voyage.
It's incredible. And it really underscores how migration is not just about physically moving. It's about personal growth, about identity, about relationships changing and evolving in ways you might never expect.
And it wasn't easy, their journey. I mean, there are these discussions among the passengers about how to get around the stricter immigration laws of 1922. This fear of being labeled undesirable. It's a reminder of how difficult and uncertain that experience was for so many.
Absolutely. And Eugenides, he grounds it in the historical context, right? Henry Cabot Lodge, warning against inferior peoples, the 1917 Immigration Act with all its prohibited categories. It's a reminder of how immigration policy has often been shaped by fear and prejudice.
It's a lot to unpack for sure.
It's a lot to unpack. And then Lefty arriving in Detroit, starting work at the Ford Rouge plant. I mean, can you imagine? The sheer scale of that place, the rule against speaking native languages. It's like being thrust into this new industrial world, this machine.
It's almost dehumanizing in a way, isn't it? Like you lose a bit of yourself in this massive system.
Yeah, and I think that experience, it speaks to the anxieties of that time. You know, the anxieties about mass production, about losing your individual identity in the face of this huge industrial machine.
And there's this tiny little detail that I love about Lefty's job interview. He basically bribes the guy with log cabin whiskey. It's such a small thing, but it says so much about navigating a new system, a new world.
Yeah, it shows you how things really worked, right? It's not always about what, sometimes it's about who you know or what you can offer. It's a glimpse behind the official narrative.
Okay, so now we're back within the family, and things get a little, well, a little unusual. We have twin cousins conceived at the same time in different rooms after a night at the theater.
I love that scene. It's almost comical, right? The timing of it all, but it immediately raises these questions about family dynamics, about what's considered normal, about fate even.
And then there's the worry about consanguinity, about the risks of cousins having children. Desdemona, she's really concerned, but Lena just kind of brushes it off. It's interesting to see those different reactions.
Yeah, and it shows you these different levels of awareness, right? Desdemona, she's aware of the risks, she's worried about the potential consequences. But Lena, she's more carefree, maybe even a little bit dismissive.
And then there's Desdemona's plea to a higher power about her child not inheriting hemophilia. You can really feel the weight of her fear, her anxiety.
It's heartbreaking in a way. And then we get this shift in the story. Sir Melina gets involved with Fard Muhammad and the Nation of Islam, and they convert an outhouse into a criadero. It's a striking image, and it introduces this whole new element into the story.
And Desdemona, she's drawn to Fard's teachings too, to his mysterious presence. What do you think it was about him that appealed to her?
I think for Desdemona, it was about finding belonging, finding meaning, especially in a society that often marginalized immigrants, The Nation of Islam offered a sense of community, a sense of purpose.
And then there's all this mystery surrounding Fard himself, right? He disappears, and there are these conflicting theories about what happened to him. Was he a Nazi agent? Was he killed by the police? It's like this unsolved puzzle.
Yeah, and I think it reflects how history is often told. There are these gaps, these uncertainties, these different versions of the truth. And especially when you're dealing with figures who challenge the status quo, like Fard, those narratives become even more complex, more contested.
It's like we're only getting a partial glimpse of the story.
Exactly, exactly.
And then we have Lefty, always the pragmatist. He starts photographing women in lingerie posed with cars during the Depression, and it was inspired by his father's hidden erotica. It's a pretty unusual way to make a living, to say the least.
Well, desperate times call for desperate measures, right? But I think it also shows Lefty's resourcefulness, his ability to adapt, to find opportunity even in the most unexpected places.
And then you have Desdemona becoming more and more aware of the racial inequality in Detroit. There's this powerful moment where a white store clerk refuses to touch a black customer's hand. And it's like a wake-up call for Desdemona. It solidifies her belief in the Nation of Islam's teachings about blue-eyed devils.
Yeah, it's a turning point for her, and it shows how personal experiences can really shape our worldview, our understanding of the world around us.
It's like her eyes are open to a whole other reality.
Exactly, exactly. And as the family grows, as the generations progress, you see these cultural clashes start to emerge. Milton and Desdemona, they have different tastes in music. They have different ideas about what's acceptable, about how to live.
And it's so relatable, right? I mean, every family has those generational differences, those moments where the parents and the children just don't see eye to eye. It's part of life.
It is. It's part of life, and it's especially pronounced in immigrant families, I think, where you have this added layer of cultural difference of trying to navigate these two worlds, the old and the new.
And then you have that scene with Milton and Gaia Vasilika at a arranged meeting, and neither of them can swim.
Such a charming
It
detail.
is. It's this awkward, sweet moment of connection, and then there's this recurring theme throughout the book of characters thinking they're gonna die or that someone else is gonna die. It's almost like a running joke, but a kind of dark one.
It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, it could be a reflection of the family's history. They've experienced so much loss, so much upheaval, that maybe this sense of impending doom, it's just kind of ingrained in them.
Like they're always expecting the other shoe to drop.
Exactly, exactly. And then, of course, there's Lefty's gambling addiction. He loses everything, ends up with just $13.26 to his name.
It's a reminder that life can change so quickly, that even when things seem stable, they can be upended in an instant.
And it introduces this element of unpredictability into the story. You never quite know what's going to happen next.
And then we meet Calliope, the narrator's childhood self, and there's this incredibly detailed description of her physical appearance, the diversity of traits, the comparisons to Kafka and Keane paintings. It's really striking.
It is, and I think it immediately sets her apart, right? It hints at her uniqueness, at her complexity, and the fact that she's compared to these artists, it suggests that there's something different about her, something special.
And then you have the tension between Calliope and her mother about her developing body, about needing a bra. It's such a relatable experience for anyone who's gone through puberty, but for Calliope, it's even more complicated because of how she feels internally about her body.
Right, and it highlights the disconnect between her physical development and her internal sense of self. And her mother, she's coming from a place of trying to protect her, trying to help her fit in, but it's just not that simple for Calliope.
And then you have this contrast between Calliope and her wealthy classmates, the charm bracelets. She's so intellectually curious, but they're not. It's like she doesn't quite fit in with them.
Yeah, and it shows you that intelligence, that curiosity, it doesn't always align with social status, with wealth. Calliope, she's different. She's a thinker.
And then Chapter 11 wins the lottery and moves to Ann Arbor. And it's another big shift for the family, right? Calliope is left to observe her parents, their reactions to the Vietnam War, her mother's new hobbies. It's like the family dynamic is changing yet again.
It is, and it leaves Calliope in this interesting position of being the observer, the one who's watching everything unfold around her.
And then you have Milton trying to share classic literature with Tessie, trying to get her to read Plato.
Bless his heart.
And then there's the chaos at his hot dog business and Tessie's frustration with Calliope's appearance. It's a lot for one family to handle.
It is, and it shows how families can sometimes struggle to connect, to understand each other, especially when everyone is going through their own individual struggles, their own changes.
And then Calliope decides to get her hair done at Sophie Sassoon's salon. It's a small thing, but it feels like a big step for her. Like she's trying to express herself, to take control of her appearance.
Exactly. It's a way of experimenting with her identity, of seeing how different she can look, how different she can feel.
And then there's that conversation between Calliope and Chapter 11 about Latin terms and Calliope's changing identity. And Chapter 11 says, "You're not my little sister anymore." It's such a poignant moment.
It is, and it's a moment of recognition, of acceptance, even if it's tinged with a bit of sadness. Chapter 11 is seeing Calliope for who she truly is, and their relationship is evolving along with her.
And then there's Mr. Da Silva, the teacher who's so passionate about Greek literature, about the Iliad. And Calliope connects with it, with her heritage. It's like she's finding a piece of herself in these ancient stories.
Right, and it shows you how powerful stories can be, how they can connect us to the past, to our culture, to our
That
identity.
can help us understand who we are, where we come from.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then Calliope gets involved in the school play, Antigone, and she starts this relationship with the obscure object. It's classic teenage drama, but it's also about Calliope exploring her feelings, her sexuality against the backdrop of this ancient Greek tragedy.
And there's that awkward scene in the obscure object's bedroom, the conversation about nudity, about insecurities. It's so real, so relatable, especially for anyone who's ever felt self-conscious or unsure of themselves during those early romantic encounters.
Yeah, it's a reminder that everyone has insecurities, everyone has anxieties, especially during those formative years. And Calliope, she's dealing with all of that, plus the added layer of figuring out her gender identity.
It's a lot to
It
process.
is. It's a lot to process. And then, boom, the Sunday dinner explodes. Milton reveals that he knows about the affair. And it's like this huge rift is torn through the family.
It's devastating, and it shows how secrets and betrayals can really shatter relationships, how they can have these lasting consequences.
And even amidst all of that trauma, you have these smaller conflicts, these everyday tensions that still exist, like the suitcase in the cramped hotel room, the argument between Calliope and Tessie. It's a reminder that life goes on, even when everything feels like it's falling apart.
The small stuff still
It
matters.
does. It does. And then we have Calliope's experience at Dr. Lucy's clinic, the discussions about her chromosomal condition, about her education. It's like a different perspective on what she's going through, a more clinical, scientific one.
And then there's that powerful moment where she looks up hermaphrodite in the dictionary. And her father's reaction is, well, it's not exactly clear. It's like a moment of isolation for Calliope, of not feeling understood, of not getting the support she needs.
Yeah, it's a tough scene, and it shows how difficult it can be to talk about these things, especially back then when there was even less understanding, less acceptance of intersex people.
And then Calliope goes to Ed's barbershop in Scranton. She has long hair and decides to cut it all off. It's a huge symbolic act, like she's shedding her old identity and embracing a new one.
It's a powerful moment, and it shows the courage it takes to be true to yourself, to make those big changes, even when it's scary.
And even during the haircut, she's still questioning, still afraid. It's not like it's a simple, easy decision. It's a process.
Right. It's a process. And even when you make a big change, it doesn't mean that all the doubts, all the fears just disappear.
Then she runs away from home, takes a bus journey, meets all these different people along the way. It's like a classic coming of age story, That journey of self-discovery, of figuring out who you are and where you belong.
Yeah. And it's also about finding your people, right? Finding those who accept you, who understand you, even if they're different from you.
And that's what happens when she meets Sheer and Presto. They're part of this whole other world, this subculture. And Presto offers her a job at the Neptune Garden.
Which is, well, it's a pretty unique place.
It is. It's a peak show, but it's also the space where people can be themselves, where they can explore their sexuality, their gender identity without judgment.
Right. And it's interesting because it's this environment that's both exploitative and liberating. It's complex, for sure.
And then there's Zora. She has androgen and sensitivity syndrome, and she has a completely different experience with her body than Calliope does. It's a reminder that there's no one way to be intersex, that everyone's experience is unique.
Exactly. And I think that's so important, to recognize the diversity within the intersex community, to understand that there's no one narrative that fits everyone.
And then Zora says this really powerful line, because we are what comes next. It's like a statement of hope, of defiance, of looking towards a future where people like her, like Calliope, are accepted, are celebrated.
Yeah, it's a beautiful line. And it speaks to the power of visibility, of representation, of claiming your space in the world.
And then, during Calliope's performance, Zora tells the myth of Salmasis and hermaphroditus. It's this ancient Greek myth about an intersex person. And it's like a reminder that intersex people have always existed, that they're not new, that part of human history.
Absolutely. And it connects Calliope's experience to this long lineage, to this ancient tradition. It gives it a sense of history, of context.
And then Milton dies, And the narrator says it was good timing because it spared him from all the family and financial troubles that were to come. It's a little bit cynical, but also kind of true in a way.
It is. It's a bittersweet moment, and it reflects the complexities of life. Sometimes even sad endings can prevent further pain, further hardship.
And then we have a final conversation between Kalibi, now Cal, and Chapter 11. Chapter 11 accepts Cal for who he is. He calls him his brother. It's a beautiful moment of reconciliation, of understanding.
Yeah, it's a really powerful ending to their story. And it shows how relationships can evolve, how they can adapt to change, how they can become even stronger through adversity.
And even though Cal has transitioned, the family dynamics, they haven't really changed that much. Yoa is still complaining, Tessie is still patient. It's like a reminder that that family is family no matter what.
It is. And those patterns, those quirks, they often persist even as individuals change and grow. It's part of the fabric of family life.
So the learner, we've gone through a lot here. We've explored this incredibly complex and moving story. And for me, the big takeaway is how connected we all are. Connected to our families, to our histories, to the world around us.
Yeah, and how those connections, they shape us, they influence us, they make us who we are.
Exactly. And the journey of self-discovery, it's never really over, is it? It's something that we're all constantly navigating as individuals and as a society.
And Middlesex, it really captures that journey in a beautiful and thought-provoking way.
It does, and it leaves you with so much to think about, so much to ponder, your own family history, your own identity, how you've been shaped by the world around you. So the learner, keep thinking, keep exploring, keep questioning. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
It really has.